Diddy trial closing arguments are being laid out by the prosecutors against Diddy. Over the last few weeks, you have learned that Sean Combs is the leader of a criminal organization. He doesn't take no for an answer. He's into kidnapping, arson, forced labor, bribery of a security officer, and brutal crimes of trafficking. Important to note, like I said yesterday, they are still charging Diddy for kidnapping and arson. They only took away the attempted charges of both that fall under the RICO. Consider these two moments. March 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel. The defendant got violent with Cassie. You saw what happened. He dragged her back to the freak-off. In 2024, at Jane's house, the defendant choked and hit her. She ran and couldn't get away. These are chapters in the same book. The defendant counted on silence and shame. He thought that his fame and wealth and power put him above the law. Over the last 7 weeks, you have heard how he used his staff to promote his power. No one could stop him. We'll talk about RICO, including the trafficking and transportation for prostitution, which are separately charged as standalone crimes. You may have heard of racketeers. When someone commits a crime as a part of a group, they are more dangerous. A group of people whose purpose was to serve and protect the defendant. It's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him, fulfilling all his desires, including his physical desires. We need to show at least 2 racketeering crimes. The defendant was head of the Combs enterprise. There was an inner circle, his chief of staff and his bodyguards. The names change, but the roles remain the same. You've heard about Christina Korm, Combs' right brain. She lived in Two-Star Island. She communicated with Sean Combs' girlfriends, his security. You heard their names: D-Rock, Roger Bonds, Ruben, Uncle Polly, and Fahim. They were armed and ready. Remember the incident at the diner with Suge Knight? David James told you that Mr. Combs had weapons. In the search, law enforcement found weapons, including a rifle with the serial numbers defaced in LA, 2 AR-15s with their serial numbers cut out in the defendant's closet. You also have the rotating cast of assistants paid by the defendant's business. Diddy's assistant, Brendan Paul, said he made $100,000 a year. Christina Korm made 6 times that. When your boss asks you to buy illegal substances, you're committing a crime. When you kidnap someone or lock his girlfriend in a hotel room after your boss stomped on her face, that's a crime. The law doesn't require us to know that they liked committing these crimes. You saw KK childing the defendant to not be so reckless, but she got him cash, illegal substances. She was a member of the enterprise, and it impacted interstate commerce. Minimal is fine. Sean Combs knowingly became a member. He was the boss. The racketeering acts: distribution of illegal substances, kidnapping, arson, bribery, facilitating trafficking of Cassie and Jane, forced labor, travel for commercial physical acts. It was a cover-up. You only need to find that someone would commit 2 acts in any of these categories. It could be 2 acts of illegal distribution, 1 of kidnapping, just 2. You have far more than 2. Let's start out with illegal substances, an essential ingredient to the freak-offs. Most people involved in this were D-Rock, Christina Korm, and Fahim, but others helped to keep the supply high. We're not talking about green, but what Brendan Paul called hard illegal substances. There are stipulations of the illegal substances found during the searches. There's snow, meth, oxy, K, a dissociative drug, GHB, mushrooms, Molly, 2C, a combination that's dyed pink. The quantities are not relevant. It's not an element of this crime. Distribution does not require a sale. You know the names of the substance dealers by now. Guido, One Stop, Baby Girl. Jane told you that on 2 occasions she was told to bring illegal substances when she flew to meet with Diddy. And it was coordinated with Christina Korm. It was corroborated by text messages. Christina Korm told Jane to swing by Mapleton to pick up the Guido package. He was called during the hotel nights, so we know what Guido's package was. More e-pills. The security team knew what it was. Guido texted Fahim, "Puff has a $450 balance with me." Brendan Paul asked for $780 for personal Gucci items. That is hard substances. The substances were distributed. It doesn't matter. He wasn't buying kilos or selling them. Personal use is just a distraction. They bought and distributed to people around him. Cassie used illegal substances at every freak-off supplied by Diddy. He introduced Jane to the substances. He gave them to her at all but one hotel night. He gave substances to Carrie Morgan and Banna Bongolan. He made Brendan Paul try Tusi to see if it was good. D-Rock would text One Stop, "I need to see someone for bro." That is Sean Combs. Guido asked Fahim to cover his debt. Christina Quorum knew that he was distributing illegal substances to the woman for the Wild King nights. Jane told KK that she was having a bad come down. KK gave her pro tips on how to deal with it. Plain and simple, this is distribution. The kidnappings. They committed them both under California and New York law. Consider Cassie. Roger Bonds made her stay put. The defendant called Cassie an S and he stomped on her face. She was disfigured. Roger Bonds caught her and brought her back. The defendant made her go to the London hotel on Sunset so no one saw her. She wanted to go home to her mom, but no. It's clear that Cassie did not consent to staying in the London hotel. David James testified that the defendant demanded to see his search history if he had posted that the defendant assaulted Cassie in the club. Then there's Capricorn Clark. They made her take a lie detector test for days in an empty building in Manhattan. This was in 2004. He accused her of holding expensive jewelry that went missing. Uncle Paulie took her to the future headquarters of Bad Boy. She was tested for 5 lies. The man administering the test told her if she failed, she'd end up in the East River. In Central Park, the defendant told her if anything happened, he'd have to off her. David James, remember this? He was tested too, to get the rat out of the team. In December of 2011, Rubin helped the defendant kidnap Capricorn Clark. It started on December 22nd of 2011. The defendant banged on Capricorn Clark's door with a weapon. He was out for revenge. He barked an order at Capricorn. "Get dressed, we're going to off Kid Cudi." They drove to Kid Cudi's house. The defendant had the weapon in his lap. This is kidnapping. He moved her a substantial distance. The defendant said that he wouldn't let her go until she brought him Cassie, who he kicked when she arrived and she fell into a fetal position. Cassie, who was with Kid Cudi that morning, testified about this. The officer who responded to the 911 call said he saw a black Escalade registered to Bad Boy. Then on January 12th of 2012, the defendant had Kid Cudi's car set on fire. Arson. Someone cut a hole in the roof of Kid Cudi's car and dropped in a Molotov. I'm not suggesting that the defendant cut the hole. He didn't even buy his own soup. You heard the voice notes. He said he was going to blow up Kid Cudi's car. What are the odds that he says it and it just happened? The coincidences just keep on coming. The defendant and Rubin just happened to be there a few weeks before. Kid Cudi was driving the same Porsche the night of the trespassing. What are the odds? Kid Cudi had conflict with no one except the defendant. Then D-Rock brought Kid Cudi to the defendant, who was looking like a Marvel supervillain. Years later, the defendant apologized to Kid Cudi. Then there's the bribery of the 2016 Intercontinental Hotel video. The defendant was having a freak-off with Cassie and one of the escorts, Jules. Flores found the defendant sitting in a chair with what he called a devilish stare. In the room, he saw another man. The defendant tried to hand Flores a stack of money. It was his first attempt at bribery that day. As Cassie leaves, Combs starts the damage control. He called Cassie over a dozen times and then he texts, "Call me, the cops are here." He was just manipulating her, but the defendant knew that he could be arrested. There was a video of the assault. He went and banged on Cassie's door with a hammer. The neighbors were going to call the police. They did, in fact. Carrie Morgan had the LAPD card. KK suggested that she had a fun drunk night. She calls and reaches out to Eddie Garcia. Eddie said no. And then KK shows up in person. He wouldn't show her the video, but he said on the record, "It's bad." Christina Quorum had the defendant call Eddie on his personal cell phone. Once Eddie said his boss will do it for $50,000, the defendant called him Eddie my angel. That's how he saved it, in the cell phone. Eddie goes to deliver the USB. D-Rock and Christina Quorum are there. Defendant counted out dollar by dollar for the bribe. Eddie Garcia told you the security guard told him he came up with the defendant. That was D-Rock. Eddie asked the defendant, "What if Cassie calls the police?" The defendant knew about this. Eddie finds the ID of the stand-in for Flores, and then NDAs are signed, and they're told, "Don't speak to anyone." Paying for silence is influencing testimony. In their opening, the defense suggested that it was just about bad publicity, and that police involvement would hurt him. The next racketeering predicate is trafficking. The defendant's inner circle assisted, whether they wanted to or not. Threats, illegal substances, lies, and illegal violence to make them have physical relations with escorts. This is not an attempt to criminalize dysfunctional relationships or personal behavior. They did not want to have physical relations with strangers while the defendant pleasured himself. They were covered in oil, sore, over and over again. We're not asking you to find that every hotel night or freak-off was trafficking, or even the majority. You only need to find the elements were met one time. During one freak-off, that's it, and he's guilty. But it was more than once. Let's start with Jane. Consider the sobriety party and in Jane's house. Let's start out with the love bombing stage. Jane was head over heels. They traveled to the Caribbean. Dr. Hughes talked about this. She never met with any witnesses, but it was like she knew them. Love bombing is a tactic. He was grooming her. He gave Jane e-pills. She fell to the ground convulsing. The defendant liked baby oil and red lights. Introduction to the freak-offs was in May of 2021. She wanted to please her partner. She was high, and the defendant had a freak-off set up that very night. An escort came. Jane was excited by that first experience. She didn't realize that she had opened Pandora's box. It became 90% of their relationship. For a while, she went along with it, and then she told him that she wanted to stop. There are texts about this. In this text message, Jane wrote, "I wanted to do things outside of these rooms to travel with you." The defendant ignored Jane's discomfort. Those hotel nights were not about what Jane wanted. They were about what the defendant wanted to see. He decided how long they would last. Jane said if she was going to have physical relations with strange men, she should choose which. The defendant made her ask for nude photos. These were not for her. When she asked to use protection, the defendant was not happy. He was dismissive and condescending. She would try to have it go faster, and he would order her to slow down. It was about what he wanted. He dangled carrots. He gave her gifts and money. He would lie to her repeatedly. She asked, "When are we doing a getaway?" He said that they could go on a yacht, but they didn't. Here is what Jane wrote in her notes app. "I don't want you to use me to fulfill your freaky wild desires in hotel rooms." He used his payment of her rent as leverage. The carrot turned into a stick. She wrote, "The threats are nonstop." He paid for her veneers because he didn't like her teeth. And then he said, "Look at the roof over your head and your pretty mouth and teeth." He wanted the all-star party, physical relations with 3 men, and she sent him a photo of her tampon. Then he sent this voice note, and they play the voice note of Diddy saying, "I'm about to really disappear on you. I don't have time for this, baby girl. You got me on my job. You got to get on your job." Message couldn't be clearer. Not going to take no for an answer. After reading Cassie's lawsuit, Jane writes to the defendant, "I feel like I'm reading my own trauma. 2 of my birthdays you forced me. You gaslit me. It was exploitation. You framed it as love for your own sick fetishes." Then the defendant called her and tried to trick her into saying that it was all consented to. He fed her a false narrative. Listen to this clip. And then they play the whole phone call of Diddy on the phone with Jane after she read Cassie Ventura's lawsuit. Dr. Hughes told you how a victim is trauma bonded to their abuser. Jane often felt that the defendant didn't listen to the truth. She said that Sean would say just move on. He told her to charge him, that the lawyers would be involved to buy her silence. So she asked for $100,000, a year for her to move on. She thought it was reasonable. Far less than Cassie. But then the defendant went ballistic. She refused to adopt her false narrative. You can read the text messages. Jane wrote that the defendant was going to show her tapes to her father of her child. Then he reached out and told her to come see him in Miami. She makes it clear that she doesn't want a hotel night, and he says okay. Despite his promises, he called an escort. Here are more threats about the rent. Jane writes, "I hate worrying about the rent." And this is in 2024. He assaulted her and forced her to perform oral on an escort. This is trafficking. It was interstate, and the Astroglide crossed state lines. The defendant knew or had a reckless disregard of force, threats of force, coercion, or fraud that was used. Consenting once doesn't mean that she consented every time. One time is enough. In 2023, he made Jane feel like she would have a proper New York City weekend, but invited escorts. Jane sent him another message. "It's dark and sleazy, in fear of losing my home." And his response? It was, "Girl, stop." Then he would FaceTime her and told her about stopping and dinner. He lied. Look, he is also texting Paul Arthur as an escort. Look at these messages. He is setting up a hotel night. When she's in the air, he tells her he has a surprise for her. She did not want it. Before the plane even lands, it's a completed act of trafficking. He tricked her. Then, under coercion, she calls Cabral to come to New York. In the next text, she says, "In New York, I knew you would pair me up with a random person." In the sobriety party, without substances, she was so disgusted that she vomits. She writes, "I'm not an animal. I need a break." And the defendant responds, "Let me spend the day. No strangers." And she replies, "You love bomb me." He switches from the carrot to the stick to the house. He texts, "Are you gonna let me into our house?" 8 times. Then he said he was sick and he needed her. She went and had physical relations with 3 different men without substances. After vomiting, he said, "Get back out there." In 2024, in Jane's house, 3 months after the Homeland Security agents searched the defendants' homes, they used Jane's house. He came there. They were supposed to have a fun date night. They drank and argued. She pushed his head into the counter. He followed her into the shower and hit her and knocked her down. He called Anton the escort and told her to have physical relations with him. She put on makeup to hide her injuries. She drove to pick up Anton at the gate. And then the defendant said, "Take this effing pill." He put his face inches from hers and asked, "Is this coercion?" He was brazenly acknowledging that he was breaking the very same law that he violated before. Jane didn't want to have physical relations with the escort that night. She said no, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. Jane performed oral until Anton finished. The defendant told security to bring cash to Anton. They didn't have it, and the next day he gave Jane the money to pay Anton. She Ubered the bag of money over to him. This is coercion. And then this is where they end for lunch, but y'all let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments.